What's going on, Rob? This is Guys, and in this video, Batman and Superman are fighting the anti-Batman, and it's amazing. So what this does is this initially opens up with Bruce Wayne standing half naked in his bedroom, calling Selina Kyle. But there's a couple cool things to talk about here, right? So in this conversation that they have, just by nature of the conversation that they're having, in the sense that she wants to say something, he wants to say something, neither of them really say the thing that they actually want to say, staying in contact and so on and so forth. This all comes off the heels of Tom King's Batman run. Now, technically, you had Tom King, then you had James Tynion, then you had Joshua Williamson, I think. But the important thing here is that during Tom King's Batman run, Batman and Catwoman were going to get married. And it was one of the most anticipated things in the entirety of his run. We were super excited about it as fans. And then he did what we were all afraid he was going to do, which was pull the rug out from under it, and they never got married, which basically pissed everybody off and soured everybody to the rest of Tom King's Batman run. And rightfully so. But the thing about this is that they still have a lot of love for each other. It was really more of the fact that Bruce Wayne cannot be Batman and have a life with Catwoman. Even by his own admission, he says, I can't have that kind of distraction. And that was the reason why they never got together in the first place. It's why they never got married. But the other thing that goes on here is that Selina Kyle kind of drops the idea that somebody out there is murdering the ultra wealthy within the city of Gotham. Now, for Selina Kyle, this is kind of a big deal. For Batman, it's a Tuesday, right? Just like somebody killing somebody in Gotham, it happens all the time. But he ends up showing up at the apartment of a guy by the name of Colin Fitzroy. Now, that name is important, not for the most significant of reasons, but for Bruce Wayne. And the reason for this is because he shows up in this place in one of the most dope ways ever, right? So like literally this guy who's like holding these people hostage is being like yelled at by the cops, you know, and he was like, get away or I'll kill them, I swear to God. And then he looks over and he sees Batman, and Batman's like, not God, not even close, and like immediately attacks the guy. It's dope. Like, it's just one of the most dope moments ever in a Batman comic. I loved it. I was like, holy cow. But of course, once he takes this guy out, that's when he realizes this guy had already killed Colin Fitzroy and his wife. And so the result of this is that Batman immediately takes it to this guy, realizing he's a hitman. He was basically a hitman that was presumably bad at his job, and that's why the cops showed up on the doorstep, because he lingered around for too long. But then you transition to the Penguin, right? Now, the Penguin's not a major player here. He's not a main focal point, but he is a catalyst, right? He is a very important part of the story in that way, because what the Penguin does is he kind of issues this broadcast, and he simply makes this case in saying, I as the Penguin have clawed and scrapped and worked my way all the way up to the top, right? Like so many of you, I started out with nothing and now I have seemingly everything, but the ultra rich are not like us, right? Like they were born into wealth. They were born into the lap of luxury. They've never had to work for anything, so they don't understand how hard it is. In a lot of ways, the speech of Penguin here mirrors the speech of Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, right? Like, you know, going on that huge tear and talking about how the police will survive and the powerful will be ripped from their decadent nests and cast out into the cold world that we all know and endure. It's very much that kind of statement. And so by feeding on the fears and the desires of the people in Gotham to have some measure of a better life for themselves, even if it means destroying the ultra wealthy in the process, that's exactly what Cobblepot does. It works in his favor, because while it doesn't necessarily lead to like a full-on revolt in Gotham, it does get him the side of the people to a degree. Now, the other part of this is that Tim Drake showing up here as Robin, meeting with Bruce Wayne, they have this bit of a conversation, and Tim Drake starts saying things like, after you lost everything, you just haven't quite been the same. What he's referring to is the events of Joker War. So Joker War was a phenomenal story written by James Tynion, and again, you'll find a link to the Batman playlist in the comments where you can get caught up with all of this stuff, because Joker War was great. The idea behind Joker War is it was quite literally Joker waging a war against Batman, but instead of just like attacking him the way he normally does, in effect, he seized control of Wayne Enterprises, and by dumping all the personal information of Bruce Wayne out there into the world, revealing his identity publicly, the federal government seized their assets and so on and so forth. And so in effect, Bruce Wayne lost it all. He lost all of his money, because by all standards of measurement, according to the law, he was operating as a vigilante and using his wealth to do so. Now, had he been locked up, the Son of Sam laws also would have applied. So there were a lot of things that he simply just couldn't do, right? There were things that couldn't work in his favor, and he effectively lost everything. And so ever since that story, he's slowly been kind of building himself back up and trying to get himself back to where he was. It was one of the coolest shifts, like coolest paradigm shifts in the entirety of the Batman mythos. And so following this, where he kind of shows up to like this ultra wealthy event, one of the things to know is just the name of Bruce Wayne that's carrying him through. And as I understand it, because I'm not ultra rich, but as I understand it, when it comes to ultra rich people like that, the name carries a lot of weight. So even if you don't necessarily have as much money as you used to, or really even any money at all, you're considered ultra old money, and Bruce Wayne is considered old money, right? His family had been around forever, they had a huge fortune, that kind of a thing. So his name allows him to sort of get into places that he otherwise wouldn't be able to access. And so the result of this is that when he shows up to this great big huge gala, he realizes that the entire event is being put on by the Penguin. So while he's putting on the front face of Bruce Wayne, Tim Drake as Robin is running around trying to figure out how to neutralize what it is that Penguin has going on. Now, it's not as though Bruce Wayne just showed up at the gala and then realized what was happening. Bruce Wayne, ever the detective, realized that with Penguin setting up this gala, he was going to try to kill all the ultra wealthy in Gotham in one fell swoop. And Penguin being as simple as he is, Batman deduced it would likely be gas. It's the most efficient way to kill as many people as possible. And of course, Tim Drake ends up finding the entire reservoir where the gas is being held and so on and so forth. And so when Penguin makes his grand declaration, right, while none of you deserve to be here, I welcome you to the gala and I welcome you to your death, he activates the gases, but then nothing happens. And so of course, that's when Bruce Wayne steps up with the mask and then starts attacking Penguin, so on and so forth. And this is when you get this amazing shift, right? It's not Penguin. It's one of the coolest things. It was never the Penguin doing this. It was, but it wasn't, right? The person standing here is actually Clayface pretending to be Penguin. Now, one of the things that I love about what DC's been doing with Batman stories recently is they've been repurposing Clayface. Instead of him just kind of being a guy who's running around pretending to be like some innocuous person and then committing some crime, that different villains are using his ability to shapeshift for their own ends. Does it turn him or potentially turn him into like a henchman, some second-class villain that's out there? Yeah, I mean, it'd be very, very easy to just kind of shuffle him off to a character that only ever appears in a Joker story when the Joker needs him for some purpose. But the idea of them using him in this way is cool because it presents other amazing possibilities, right? Even Batman has used Clayface for this purpose in his own ends, right? The old Detective Comics stories from DC Rebirth focused on this heavily. So again, it's really cool to see this massive shift with Clayface. Now, of course, once this reveal comes along, right, you know, they realize Penguin's not there. At that point, it's, we got to get everybody out of here. The problem with this is that as this happens, one of the henchmen pulls a gun and shoots Tim Drake through the neck. And when that happens, while Batman's interrogating Clayface, wanting to know where the Penguin is, he realizes Robin's been shot and everything else gets ignored. Now, so Batman literally grabs everybody, or I'm sorry, grabs Robin and then leaves. What's so interesting about this, though, is that it also illustrates the fact that the Penguin is not nearly as dumb as Batman thought he was. That the Penguin sure had the gas as like his main plan, right? His plan A for killing all the ultra wealthy here. But as a plan B, leaving nothing to chance, he also set it up so the building would collapse, right? So that's one of the cool things that happens here. But the other part of that is that Batman grabbing Robin takes off, but he comes to this realization just because of what Tim Drake's telling him that he can't show up with Tim Drake at the hospital. That one, he's bleeding out too much too fast because the bullet hit an artery, so he's bleeding out too hard in order for Batman to fix it on his own, or for Batman to take him to Leslie Tompkins, the back alley doctor that Batman uses. It doesn't work that way, right? There's just too much blood loss happening. And so what Batman has to do is switch Tim Drake out of his Robin clothes into like civilian clothes and then take him to the hospital. The other reason why he took him to this hospital is that in interrogating Clayface, he realized, or at least Clayface told him, where the Penguin was. And the Penguin himself is actually dying, right? He's literally perishing. Like, that's it. Like, he's just dying of whatever illness he has. And it's kind of a funny thing because he says that he has like mercury poisoning, but Penguin also has an ace up his sleeve, right? He's got this amazing ace because what he says is that no matter what his target was, he was never able to destroy Batman. Now, he doesn't say that he was inspired by the events of Joker War, but given the chronology of Batman up to this point, you have to believe that he was, because one of the big things about Joker War is it showed that Batman was not untouchable, that sometimes the best way to take out Batman is not by attacking the Bat family, Robin and Batgirl and all those different characters, but is actually going after Bruce Wayne himself, the things that allow him to be Batman, right? Kicking the chair out from under him, so to speak. And so by doing that, this more or less pushed Penguin in a direction, or seems to push him in a direction, that taking out Batman indirectly is the best way to do it. And so knowing he's dying, the Penguin ends his own life by calling the nurse while simultaneously popping a cyanide capsule. And so what it looks like when the nurse gets in there is that Batman killed the Penguin. That's exactly how it looks. And it's amazing. It's such a smart move by Oswald Cobblepot. I love this decision. I love Chip Zdarsky's run, man. It's some of the most amazing creativity that I've seen when it came to writing Batman in years. And so with Batman basically bailing out, what this does is it activates the failsafe system. Now, this is one of the cool things, because if you don't know the history of the Batman mythos, the purpose and the benefit of failsafe is kind of lost on you. But if you do know the Batman mythos, it's amazing, right? So here's one of the coolest things, right? It's one of the best tie-ins ever. Of course, Batman retreats back to the Batcave, tries to catch himself a little bit of a nap, try to recuperate while Robin's healing. But one of the things that happens here is you get this realization that because the world now believes that Batman had killed the Penguin, that it actually kind of worked against what the Penguin was planning for. That in fact, because criminals are afraid of the fact that Batman kills now, crime is lower than it's ever been. That's why I tell you guys, Batman killing villains is probably a good idea, right? I mean, it's you know, above a certain threshold, right? I mean, a guy who like snatches a purse probably doesn't deserve to die. But the Joker, yeah, man, yes, the Joker needs to be done with all his living. But while Batman's basically recuperating, the failsafe robot emerges and crushes this guy. And that's the thing, it's not even close. There's this point where like Batman goes to like punch failsafe. He's like, man, son, you better come strong. Like he immediately dominates this guy, like just dominates Batman in the most amazing way ever. Like it's to the point where Batman has to just flee for his life. Like that's literally the only thing he can do is just run, like just to run as fast as he can. And even when he starts talking to Barbara Gordon Oracle and is like, can you find a way to hack this thing? Do you know what this is? Can you scan its systems? Can you give me any help whatsoever? Her response is no. She's like, the best I can tell you is that the scan here suggests a variety of robotics, including a Mazotech. For those of you guys who aren't really familiar with a Mazo, no pun intended, was amazing. So a Mazo was a robot that had the ability to duplicate powers, fighting styles, the whole 9 yards. But of course, with this Amazotech being there, that's when Batman realizes it's too much, right? Like this failsafe is way too much. And in fact, when Batman tries to flee, literally failsafe grabs his cape and pulls him back down to the ground. He's like, where are you going, son? Like literally grabs him and like pulls him back down to the ground. Like, no, son, you ain't running from this fight, right? Then the rest of the Bat family shows up. So you have like Spoiler and you have like all these characters who show up. Not even in hell would you see a massacre like this, right? Like literally they all come running at failsafe and he's like, all right, home slice. And he just dismantles them all. He takes the whole team apart piece by piece, dominating every single person. I mean, it's crazy. Robin has to like grab Batman and get him out of there as fast as he can, right? Like literally get him away. And then like failsafe come chasing after him. Like Nightwing finally catches up to failsafe. And then as soon as Nightwing shows up, failsafe just flies away. So like literally there's nothing these guys can do. Like this thing was enough to dominate Batman and the rest of the team. It's one of the coolest moments out here. Now, of course, failsafe does eventually come back. And when he does, you have Tim Drake, you have Signal, you have these guys who were like trying to find a way to defeat him. And again, he just crushes them all. I mean, it's one of the most amazing moments where like the Bat family is just readily taken apart. And that's why I say failsafe is awesome, man, because none of these guys never had a chance. You know what I mean? Like you have like a Batman story and it's like they're putting up a good fight and the clouds will part and the planets will align and then comic book logic will be used and like they will win. But like, that's not what's happening here, man. Like these guys are fighting their best and they're getting absolutely crushed. This guy's like the Brawley of the Batman comics, right? Just like taking these guys apart with the greatest of ease. And so you switch over to Leslie Tompkins in the Batcave, who again is kind of like this sort of night nurse type character that Batman uses whenever he needs aid, only for her to find out that like failsafe is there instead of Batman. More so than that, what Batman does is he has this kind of inner monologue when he gets to a different location, a separate location from the Batcave itself. And what happens is he tells Tim Drake, there's something that I have to do and I have to do this thing alone. And where Tim Drake kind of begs and pleads and says, no, you gotta let me help you with this, the response of Batman in his inner monologue is he wouldn't understand, right? None of them would. The lengths that I've gone to, I've softened, surrounded myself with children, but in my early days, God help me, in my early days, I went too far. Failsafe is familiar, but familiar doesn't mean the same thing when you have a mind that remembers everything. It's an aberration, a fault line running clean across my memory. There's a ticking deep in my head like a clock, tick tock. So what he's basically saying here is failsafe sounds familiar, but it doesn't sound like anything that he's ever created, but he knows he did. And so he doesn't really understand why. And so what he ends up doing is actually kind of getting into this little bit of a chest. And then when he re-emerges, he's a totally different Batman, right? He's like, I'm the Batman. This is one of the coolest moments because again, this all goes into the Batman mythos. This is when we kind of tie back around into all of this stuff. So what this does does here is it basically kind of jumps back a little bit, and it involves a conversation between Batman and Superman. And the conversation here is the two of them talking about how Batman was voted out of the Justice League. Now, the reason why this conversation is taking place is because this happens after the events of Tower of Babel. So Tower of Babel was the story that introduced the Batman protocols. Basically, what Bruce Wayne had done in secret is he had developed a series of protocols on how to neutralize each member of the Justice League. So with Superman, it was exposing him to a form of kryptonite that would make his skin translucent, and it would basically lead to him being paralyzed with pain because of the massive amount of solar radiation being bombarded onto him, right? Because his skin serves as a kind of filter, like having a shade over a lamp. That with the Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, it was taking away his eyesight. With Wonder Woman, it was putting a device in her head that would lead to her seeing an enemy that wasn't there, and she would basically fight to the death. She would fight until her heart gave out. But the result of this is that in the aftermath of Tower of Babel, Batman was voted out of the league because they lost trust in him. They couldn't trust him anymore. And so this is kind of a follow-up conversation where literally Superman asks him, what's your backup plan, right? Like, you have a backup plan for the entirety of the Justice League. What's the backup plan for Batman? What's the backup plan for the man who knows every move? And his response is, it's you, Superman. He's like, no, there's no way that's true, because you were able to overpower me. You knew exactly what I was going to do. You knew exactly what my weaknesses were, and I didn't know exactly what yours were. So what's the backup plan for the man who has the answer to everything? And the answer is failsafe. That's literally the answer to this. Now, of course, this wonky, crazy looking version of Batman, there's a reason why he looks like this, right? This Batman refers to himself as the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. Now, here's the thing, right? Understanding the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh is kind of weird, right? So wind the clock back to the 1950s, right? It's Batman issue number 100 and something. I don't remember the issue number, but basically it was Silver Age Batman. Anybody who knows anything about Silver Age Batman will tell you that those comics were just a descent into total madness. But that's where you were initially introduced to Batman Zur-En-Arrh, who was technically the Batman of a different world, but basically had the powers of Superman. Now, fast forward to Grant Morrison's run, and Grant Morrison basically wiped all that away and said that the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh is the result of what happened when Batman was exposed to a mental attack. And so the creation, kind of the manifestation of Batman Zur-En-Arrh is effectively a version of Batman that manifests as a kind of separate personality to protect Batman from like psychic attacks. But one of the things that had happened here is, at least as it's being done here by Chip Zdarsky, is that presumably in the aftermath of the Tower of Babel storyline, that Batman had created failsafe. The Batman of Zur-En-Arrh had created failsafe. And this was done expressly because of the fact that if Bruce Wayne himself had created failsafe, then all somebody had to do was figure out that Batman had done it and then potentially attack him or something along those lines, but it could be easily neutralized, right? By having the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh create failsafe, Bruce Wayne wouldn't actually remember who failsafe was. More so than that, he wouldn't remember how to overpower him. It's the perfect plan, right? He'll never really be able to figure out exactly how to take this thing down. And that's exactly what happens. Now, the other thing about Batman Zur-En-Arrh is he's kind of an answer to the question, what happens when the brakes come off with Batman, right? When he's far more ruthless, more aggressive, when he doesn't really care about the people around him, when he's kind of like the sociopathic Batman, that's what this guy is. And notice this, a lot of this comes by way of the fact that one, he is far more aggressive in his fight against failsafe than Batman traditionally would be, right? This guy doesn't hold back. Batman always kind of holds back to a degree just because of the fact that he doesn't really know exactly how much energy he'll need to use in a fight against an opponent. So by kind of rationing it out based on the context of the situation, it allows him to fight longer in a more capable way. When it comes to somebody like Batman Zur-En-Arrh, he just goes balls in, right? He just goes nuts, right? Just starts attacking this guy, you know, with every ounce of strength and capability that he has. But again, it's not enough, right? It's not going to happen. Now, the other reason for why failsafe even exists in the first place, and that's one of the big revelations here, is that with the belief that Batman had killed Oswald Cobblepot, that he killed the Penguin, that Batman has simply gone too far. And that failsafe activated as an answer to the question, what happens when Batman goes off the rail? Who's going to stop Batman when he finally starts killing people? And so that's why failsafe is here in the first place. Now, one of the funny things that happens is that Tim Drake tries to rationalize with failsafe and say, like, Batman did not kill Oswald Cobblepot, Cobblepot killed himself, but it doesn't work. Right? Because at the end of the day, failsafe is operating on programming, which is Batman's gone too far and Batman has to die. Now, ultimately, failsafe makes his way to the old Gotham Manor, the Wayne Manor, and then of course Bruce Wayne and everybody basically follows suit. Now, technically they already kind of knew he was going to be going there because Batman, or at least Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, had basically put a kind of tracking device on failsafe. But in this fight, one of the funny things that happens is that because Batman of Zur-En-Arrh is so extreme here, he doesn't see the kind of familial connections that come with the different members members of the Bat family. He sees them as soldiers, right? That's what he is. He's like, they're soldiers. That's all they are. And so what it does is it kind of jumps to the mindscape of Bruce Wayne, so to speak, where you have the Bruce Wayne personality that had handed control over to Batman of Zur-En-Arrh, but Bruce Wayne's kind of beseeching him and saying like, they're not soldiers, right? You are the most pure version of Batman, which is the unadulterated, unfiltered version of Batman that will do whatever it takes to defeat the enemy, even things that I as Bruce Wayne am not necessarily willing to do. But understand here, these guys are not soldiers. Robin is not a soldier. He's basically my son, right? He's family, and you have to treat him that way. And so what it does is it seems to lead to Bruce Wayne seemingly retaking control of his body due to the realization that while the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh seems to have the ability to take out Failsafe, that the collateral damage would just be too extreme, that he would put the other members of the Bat family in harm's way, or even just callously disregard their lives because he doesn't see them as anybody meaningful. And so what ends up happening is Bruce Wayne basically sends Tim Drake away and says, you need to call for help when your signal comes back, right? Because Failsafe has the ability to disrupt their communications. So he literally says like, go and get help. When you have it, then come back. And so in this fight between the two, again, Bruce Wayne is just overpowered because he can't go toe to toe with this guy. He can't go toe to toe with Failsafe. And so in this moment, when Failsafe literally gets the upper hand on Batman, and I mean just like pummeling this guy, beating on him like a side of beef, right? Like when he's literally about to kill Batman on the spot, there's this whoosh that comes in from nowhere and whisks Batman out of the way of this attack, right? This guy just says, I'm going to need you to back away from my friend, only for us to find out Superman is here, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, son. Batman and Superman are facing off against the anti-Batman in the next video. With that being said, guys, cliffhangers, we're gonna bring this to an end. Thank you all for watching. I will catch you all later. Peace.